And welcome in to the Week 15 edition of the Consistently Cashin podcast here at BigGuyFantasySports.com. As you can see right here and down there, Colby Conway at Colby R. Conway over on X, formerly known as Twitter. And with me here, as always, Tampa Bay 316, Ron Rigney. Ron, how are we doing, my friend?
Doing good, my man. We were just talking about how you and I both are done with work until the new year. So that's a great feeling for the next couple of weeks. I ordered a few Christmas gifts this morning, but we want to help everybody out there get some Christmas gifts with some of this holiday cash. And last week, my friends, if you would have thrown this thing in a GPP, you probably would have won a little bit of cash, but we definitely got that 50-50 for you. Definitely knocked it out of the park. So hopefully we can continue that gravy train going this weekend into the holiday.
That is the plan. I'm looking at the lineup here. I know we had talked about it during the week, but every player in our lineup scored a touchdown except for one. Alexander Madison was the only one who didn't. But looking back at last week, I entered it into the giant $5 up or giant $5 double up single entry. Took 56th out of 9.2 thousand. So again, we don't build these lineup for GPPs. It just happened to work. But I mean, we had 24 from Justin Fields, 21 Joe Mixon, 6 from Alexander Madison, 37 Debo, 26 for DJ Moore to give us 50 plus from the Fields and Moore stack. Rashee Rice came through with 19, Isaiah Likely 19, Sutton 15, and then 20 from the Vikings defense because we knew that week they'd put up a 0, or the Raiders would put up a 0 against Minnesota, knowing that they would come back and drop a 60 burger on the Chargers. So fun stuff there. What a start to the week, too. A game with 60-plus points, multiple defensive touchdowns. Utterly insane. I'm in the, as are you, we're in the Kings Classic leagues. And we talked before the year, my running back situation is quite dire. And it's not necessarily the greatest. So I'm rolling with 2 healthy running backs. And healthy is a stretch. I have Devin Singletary and Davon Achane. Picked up Zamir White Thursday morning. Achane didn't practice Wednesday, Thursday. So I said, what do I do? Do I play Zamir White and hope for the best, or do I hold out hope that Achane can play with turf toe? I ended up starting Zamir White, was sky high through that game. Then I saw Achane logs a limited practice Friday, so he's probably going to play. I don't know if I can even get Achane in the lineup because that team is so wide receiver heavy.
Love it when a plan comes together. Love it.
Well, we'll see. Ultimately, even if Achane goes for 30, I think my process was correct and that it was the safer play. But we'll see. They could hold Achane out.
Yeah.
Don't know. Turf toe is never really good for a running back. But
and Jeff Wilson's not half bad either. I mean, they've still got him floating around in the backfield too. So they've got guys back there. If they want to hold him, they definitely could. I got the same issue in a league I squeaked into the playoffs with, and I ended up benching him. And luckily, I didn't have to go with any of the Thursday night guys, but the guys I have to start are kind of questionable in place. But yeah, you did the right thing. Absolutely.
Well, let's see if Achane makes our lineup or maybe a Raheem Mostert for the Week 15 slate. Let's go ahead and pull up the board over at DraftKings. Here, let's start at the quarterback position. Josh Allen, Dak Prescott, Tua Tagovailoa. Tua being the third highest priced quarterback is really interesting because when you look at Vegas props, his passing yards is I think it's sub 220. And that's typically not the range that he tends to fall in. So I think I know where the chalk is going to be this week at quarterback, but let's see what kind of we end up talking through what our process is here. I mean, there's a lot of good matchups. As far as I know, weather in Buffalo might be a little shaky, but we'll have to see because remember they said the weather in the Jets game was going to be a problem, and that didn't stop Zach Wilson for throwing for 600 freaking yards and 78 touchdowns. So what are you thinking here at quarterback? Who are you looking at? And then depending where you go, I'll push a different question your way.
Yeah, I looked at that top there. Nothing all that appealing at the top. Dak was a little bit appealing if the weather ends up playing out, just because Buffalo over the last few weeks has not been, or I should say they have been pretty generous to fantasy quarterbacks, allowing the second or third most points per game over the last few weeks. And I know they had a bye in there as well, but those 2 games that they played, they've given up some yardage. I tended to scroll down a little further, looked at Brock Purdy there. My only concern with that is if they get a lead and it gets out of hand, they may not throw as much. I ended up settling around that 6,000 mark with Matthew Stafford against Washington. That Washington team, we talk about them. I think that they're kind of our team, our defense to pick on every week. But they've been rolling. They've been scoring points. Matthew Stafford has been lights out. But at that $6,000 price point, that's a tough one to pass up. I like Jordan Love around there. And, of course, Sam Howell's going to have to chuck it all over the yard to keep up. So I think you can find a really nice quarterback there in that 6,000 to 6,300 range and not have to pay up for those big boys at the top.
I would agree. This is a week where I think value is going to come down. You could even look at Brock Purdy just because Arizona's not that good and the receiver should have a good spot against them. And if I'm not mistaken, Arizona, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, ninth most fantasy points allowed to quarterbacks for the season as a whole. So there's a good spot to attack them there. The tough thing with Purdy in a matchup like this, where the opposing run defense is really bad, is does Purdy have one of those games where he throws for 280, but McCaffrey takes 3 touchdowns on the ground and Debo adds 1 on the ground, and we don't get one from Purdy? That's the only thing that scares me a little bit with him, but I don't mind Brock Purdy at all. The matchup for Matthew Stafford is just so darn good. The Commanders, 9 touchdowns to quarterbacks over the last 4 weeks with 0 interceptions. Second most fantasy points allowed per game to quarterbacks, both over the last 4 weeks and the 2023 season as a whole. So I think Matthew Stafford's going to be quite chalky. I do really like Jordan Love because Jaden Reed's still a bit underpriced, and the Jordan Love, Jaden Reed stack is actually really, really affordable. So quarterback, we're going to have some options there. And it's not one of those like in past weeks where it's, well, if we have the money, we'll do this. If we're going to have the money for Stafford, we probably have the money for Jordan Love. So it'll be really interesting to see where we end up going there. If we just drop down a little bit here, I'll tell you what, I really want to say if you're going super, super cheap, take a look at Case Keenum, just because Tennessee has been so generous to quarterbacks this season, and game script should be in his favor. But I don't think you're gonna have to need to get down there. Like you're already saving with Stafford and Love and Co. I don't think you're gonna need to have to get down there too far. You could give a shout out to Will Levis if you want, just because Houston's been pretty bad against quarterbacks too. But if you're gonna do 5,400 for Levis, unless you're in a spot where you're like, nope, every other spot is on my guy and I can't move anybody off, I refuse to do it, I will not do it, then fine, go down with Levis or even like a Flacco type. But other than that, try to get yourself up to Stafford or Love. Any other thoughts at the quarterback position?
No, the only other one I thought about that if you wanted to throw a dart, you wanted to save a Grant, Desmond Ritter. I mean, Drake London went off. You know, we had him in the lineup last week, or we talked about him at least. $5,200, but like you said too, I think there's enough value across the board here that you're not going to have to get that ultra cheap. And I think Ritter's more of maybe a dart throw into GPP as well, but he's the only guy around this area that I was looking at, other than maybe Will Levis.
Yep, I would agree with that. Let's head on over to running back. Obviously, if you have the money, you're going Christian McCaffrey. That's just, if you have the money, it's such a good spot. Arizona's been bad against running backs this season, second most fantasy points per game, second most yards on the ground, and the most receiving scores allowed to the position. So, yep, if you have the money, you can do that. What's really interesting to me when you look at Vegas markets is Kyren Williams' total yards is very similar to McCaffrey's in terms of what Vegas is expecting, but Kyren Williams is $1,800 cheaper, and the workload for Kyren has been absolutely insane. I think the issue with Kyren is going to be, if you go Stafford, you're probably going one of the receivers. Can you go Stafford, Kyren, and then if you go Kupp and Nakua, that's 3 high-priced dudes. And Stafford's not, but you're paying up for already one running back and one receiver. Can you do it? But I mean, just look at this: 21 carries, 25 carries, 4 targets, 5 targets. 16. He's basically guaranteed 20 touches a game.
Yeah,
that's insane. Because if McCaffrey's going to get that, it's $1,800 cheaper to Kyren. So I don't know. That's just me looking at the top tier here. Do any of the running backs, let's say $7,000 and above, do any of those guys crack your lineup?
Well, of course, I tried McCaffrey. The only reservation I have is with McCaffrey a little bit is there going to come a point where we're getting closer to the playoffs? Are they going to maybe kind of pull him back a little bit and give him a little less work going into there? Because they could go into this game without Christian McCaffrey and I think get a victory fairly easily with everything else they have. But it didn't work at $9,300. Kyren Williams, every reason that you said. I went a little cheaper than that, but even if you went Stafford and Kyren Williams, I think he gets enough in the passing game. It's going to give you a little bit. You're not going to get a 50-point stack like we threw in there last week, but you're spot on with the 20 touches. And Kyren Williams has looked impressive. He reads blocks well. He's not the fastest guy out there, but he knows. It seems like he knows the system very well. He's very smart, and Notre Dame guy as well. But I don't know that I'd go anything above Kyren Williams. Kamara kind of scares me a little bit. I ended up settling a little bit out of that 7,500. I went down to the 7,000 range and went with our guy that has recorded 8 straight clutch games. Rashad White with a nice matchup against the Packers. That dude has been a beast. He's been lights out the last, like I said, 8 weeks with clutch games. And that Green Bay run defense is in the bottom third all season. They're in the bottom third again in the last 3 weeks and allowing fantasy points. I settled there for my first one. Second guy I went with is probably the chalkiest play of the week at $5,800, and that's Zeke Elliott. I don't know how you can't get Zeke Elliott in the game. I'm not expecting another 7 catches, but it looks like they want to get him involved in the passing game and obviously hand him the football because there's nobody else back there. So at $5,800, that's a hard one to ignore as well.
Yeah. I don't love it. He scares me. I'm being honest. He does. I mean, I don't know how else to say it. Like I like the price point for the volume that you're going to get. It's just Kansas City. They've been a little bit more generous of late to running backs. I don't know. It scares me, but it's hard to ignore the volume.
It's hard to argue that for $5,800, man. I
would agree. We come down here. I would love to go James Cook. I just looking at the weather. So I'm looking over Roto Grinders for the weathers. Shout out Kevin Roth for the weather updates here. Right now, he's got Dallas and Buffalo basically saying that it's another game where it probably rains all game long, but winds, which will be gusty earlier in the day, should be quieting down for game time. And later on in the game, it's even less. James Cook has been getting a ton of work. I still think you're okay to use him in a spot like that. I would check Tennessee's injury report tomorrow, but if Jeffrey Simmons is going to be out again, which I do believe he's going to be, that run defense is softer. And with Case Keenum under center, I expect Singletary to get a lot of work. He's now the RB1 for that team. Dameon Pierce is just, It's as much as I love the guy, him getting the ball now isn't beneficial for that offense. It doesn't turn out effective. I don't know if I love him for DFS, but I love him for any of your player props this week. Tyjae Spears, his role is increasing. Will Levis is giving him a ton of targets in the passing game. Again, I think that's more for player props than for DFS, but if you want to be a little bit contrarian, you could go with him. We get down here. I don't think you really need to do anything quite down in there. It's really interesting this week. If I do like Raheem Mostert because you have a better chance running on the Jets, so I think that puts you in a good spot. Everyone's going to love to point out that Derrick Henry has like 17 200-yard games against Houston, but Houston has been better against the run this year. Stopping them out of the backfield, like through pass attempts, they have not been good. They're still bad. But in terms of rushing yards, they are much, much better. So take a look at him, and I will give a shout out. It scares the crap out of me. Carolina doesn't stop anybody on the ground. And Bijan, the workload is increasing. They're giving it to him more. Carolina's allowed the 4th most fantasy points per game to running backs this season. And I mean, we're getting double-digit carry for Bijan and a bunch of targets, especially with Ritter back under center. So I like Bijan at 6,800 as well. Anything else at the running back position?
No, the only one I was sitting here kind of mulling over to was you just hit on him was Bijan Robinson at 68. If the touches are there, then that $6,800 could turn out to be a real value. But we also know that Arthur Smith doesn't necessarily care about our fantasy teams and our DFS lineups. So that scares me a little bit with that, but that's a hell of a price for what you might get.
Running backs that have played at least double-digit games this year, there are 4 running backs who are 85% consistent or higher. Raheem Mostert, Bijan Robinson, Alvin Kamara, and Christian McCaffrey, and David Montgomery. So make that 5. So just throwing that out there for the consistency aspect here because we are consistently cashing. Let's go over to the wide receiver position here. Let's just get right into it. We're looking at Stafford. Cooper Kupp, 7,800. Puka Nacua, 7,300. Let me ask you this. Can you do both?
Sure. You can. You can do whatever you want, man.
Would you do both?
I would not. And here's my only qualm with that is, here again, we do all this analysis. We look at all these things, but you have to have human beings actually go out and do these things. And there's a lot of things that can go south. And a lot of times, we sit here and look at this and the analysis is there, but it just doesn't back it up. And when you have 3 spots devoted to a team, or even if you went Kyron Williams and got crazy and went 4, that's Stafford gets hurt, has a bad game, doesn't get, anything can happen. You've got 3 guys in your lineup. I don't want to say they're giving you zeros, but they're definitely not giving you that value that you're looking for. We got to stack one or the other. The one I ended up going with was Puka Nacua to save the $500, but I think that, if we really wanted to, I think we could make either one work if we wanted to get one of them in the lineup, but I think both is pushing it a little bit.
I don't think we'll have an issue getting one of them. I really don't. I think we're going to be fine. And, Cooper Kupp had the bigger game last week. Puka continues to get targets.
Yeah.
Puka's been more consistent. That's kind of the item there. They do play him both inside and out, so they should be able to move him around to get him in good matchups. I don't know how you think about this, but he played without gloves last week, which real like old school type vibe, but he looked really weird without gloves on. But he produced. So who am I to say? So that's something there. So let's go. That's one team. Another offense that's likely to be stacked is going to be San Fran. So there's Debo and Ayuk. Can you play? Okay. Because if I say can you, you're going to hit me with that same cop-out answer again. Would you play both Debo and Ayuk?
I wouldn't, just because here again, I don't know what that game is going to look like. I don't know if that game is going to, they're going to get out to a big lead and put the brakes on and maybe, give McCaffrey the ball or even give it, to any of the backup running backs. I mean, one of those guys is going to get the targets. One of those guys is going to go off. I mean, there's a very good possibility, both of them. I think I'd feel a little bit better with Debo just because of the rushing aspect too. So he's another guy. If they do decide to hand off quite a bit, he's going to get the carries. Ayuk obviously does not get carries. So I think of the two, we're sitting at 72 for Ayuk and then 77 for Debo. I like Debo a little more, but I also don't like that he's $500 more either, but he's the one I like out of the two. I
would love to play Chris Olave, but his injury scares me. I don't think he's going to be a game time decision. It's not worth it. So I'm not really going to look at him. CD Lamb's just matchup proof at this point. That just is what it is. I'm fading Tyreek Hill. I can't pay $9,900 with the questions surrounding him. DJ Moore, I'm not worried about the questionable tag. I just don't love the matchup, so I'm not really looking at him. I do like him for GPPs, but not for cash games. I do really like Rashee Rice because I think Bill Belichick and company, it's going to be stop Taylor's boyfriend at all costs. And Rashee Rice will kind of be, you've seen it against New England in years. It's the second guy that does the damage. Yep. Rice is the second guy now. Like it's Kelsey's the one. And honestly, we're at the point where Rice is 1A or 1B, however you want to look at it. Like he's right there with him. So he's good. I will tell you this, the price tag for Garrett Wilson's criminal. I understand he had some down weeks, but when Zach Wilson is under center, all he does is throw it to Garrett Wilson. Like, look at this, 14 targets there. You're going to hear it. You're going to hear it on Prop It Like It's Hot. So make sure you check that out with Bob Lung and I took the juice on one of his lines just because it's good. But let me see if I can get you this. Okay. So this season, in the games where Zach Wilson has played every snap in that game, Garrett Wilson is averaging 6.3 receptions on 11.3 targets per game. He is a target hog with Zach Wilson. The price tag for Garrett Wilson here is simply way too cheap at $5,800, especially with DraftKings PPR scoring.
Agree. Yeah, I was looking at him too. That $5,800, everything you said. I mean, those targets are there every week when Zach Wilson is there. And I don't know. I mean, I can name some receivers on that roster, but I can't name anybody else that's getting catches and getting consistent targets other than Garrett Wilson. So that should tell you something. But yeah, that was the next place I went. I got him, and then I went a little bit above that. Looked at DeAndre Hopkins a little bit. Don't know how I feel about that, but I feel way better about Wilson.
You should feel good about it.
Cheaper. Yeah,
you should feel good about Hopkins too.
Yeah.
Let me ask you this: can you tell me why Romeo Doubs is still priced higher than Jaden Reed?
I can't. I wish I could.
I mean, I understand
because there's nothing backing that up.
Yeah, pass production doesn't always guarantee future performance, but like 7, 11, 6, 16, 12. Okay, that's cool. And his price has hovered right around this mark. But 20, I understand 5, 15, 19. Jaden Reed still has not cracked $5,000. Like, can we call him? I don't want this to come off as an insult to him because he's very talented. But can we call him a poor man's Deebo Samuel? I mean, 5, 6 targets. Last couple weeks, 2, 3 rushing attempts every single game, and he's scoring rushing touchdowns too. Like, as far as Christian Watson's doubtful. Reed's popped off in these games, and there's fewer defenses that are as generous to wide receivers as Tampa Bay is. And like for the season, they are the 6th most generous to. Yeah,
and they're another secondary we've been picking on. I think almost every week, and it's panned out every week. And I don't think it's a mistake that, as the Packers have kind of got that ship right and been on a little run, that Jaden Reed has become a bigger part of that offense as well. I don't think that that's a coincidence at all.
If you're going to go the other side of the Rams Commanders, Curtis Samuel is my preferred play just because the Rams have struggled with slot receivers throughout the course of the season. So he's the one that I like there. I'll also give a shout out. If you're going GPPs, this is the week for Gabriel Davis or Khalil Shakir. Just because after seeing what Dallas did last week with putting Gilmore on A.J. Brown, I wouldn't be surprised if Stephon Gilmore goes around with Stephon Diggs, which is going to leave Gabriel Davis with Deron Bland, who he gets the interceptions. I get it. He also gets burned more often than anybody wants to talk about. And then in the slot, Jordan Lewis has been one of the worst slot corners over the past couple of weeks, and that's where Khalil Shakir lives. So 3,800 for Shakir is interesting if you need something there. Honestly, Ron, if you go Stafford, you go Cupper, Nakua, and you want more from that game, I don't know if we can avoid Demarcus Robinson. 7.5 targets last 2 weeks, touchdowns in both weeks. If I'm not mistaken, I wrote the Red Zone report up over at fantasyalarm.com, and I believe Robinson has the same amount of red zone targets as Nakua and Cup over the last couple of weeks. And if it's not the same, he's right around it. But 3,600 for a guy who's, 5+ targets in back-to-back weeks, you could do far, far worse than that.
And Demarcus Robinson's been a dude in the past. I mean, he's kind of a journeyman receiver, but he's had some games or some stretches where 2, 3, 4 weeks he's caught a touchdown or he's been, the focal point of whatever offense he is in. But yeah, it's hard to ignore when a guy gets that many targets that in consecutive games and costs that much.
Yeah,
or that little.
Yeah, if you trust Case Keenum, you could look to like a Noah Brown or a John Mechie, but I expect Dalton Schultz to get the most targets from Case Keenum. Veteran quarterbacks love the tight end. That's just how it is. I don't make the rules. I know Tennessee's very, very tough on tight ends, but I mean, when you look at the state of affairs at the Houston wide receiver room, Schultz is probably the best weapon that they have. So could look to him. I'm not getting to Travis Kelce this week. I just 7,600. It's not going to fit my build, and I don't love going up against New England there. So tight end position. I mean, at this point, can we really fade David Njoku? It seems like all Joe Flacco does is give him targets downfield. Obviously a monster week last week, but I mean, he's been consistent too. Look at this, 10, 17, 12, 11, 12, 11. I mean, yeah, you had that 3, whatever. But I mean, he's been really consistent, and that price tag hasn't moved all that much. So is Njoku in play for you? And if he isn't, or if he is, but you prefer someone else, who is that someone else?
Njoku is the play for me.
Okay.
I didn't look anywhere else. The only other place I kind of looked as I went down, like you said, Dalton Schultz. I was looking at Noah Brown possibly for my wide receiver core, but questionable. Dalton Schultz has got it done, especially recently. I kind of looked at Darren Waller just a little bit, but I don't know what to expect off the injury. You got Tommy Cutlets in there at quarterback. Might target him early in offense, so at 4,400, that's not bad. But if I'm going to pay that 4,400, when Bob and I talk in the consistency show every week about the tight end position, there's grumbles and groans, and there's a lot of puking in your mouth and trying not to get overly sick about it. But the one guy that we talk about every single week for all the reasons that you said is David Njoku. And Joe Flacco, it reiterates what you said about those veteran quarterbacks with the tight end. But I think that's, we were talking about some of those values at wide receiver. I think that $4,700 for Njoku is criminally underrated as well, especially with the matchup against Chicago.
Yeah, let me give you – I love Njoku too, just for the record. For the season, Chicago's allowing the 6th most fantasy points per game to tight end. So let me throw – actually, for the season, what kind of sucks is for the season as a whole, Cincinnati and Denver have allowed the most fantasy points per game to tight ends, and both of them play on Saturday. So we don't get to use Hawkinson or Laporta. I will throw a couple names out there. The Rams, 4th most fantasy points allowed to tight ends this season. I do like Logan Thomas, not very consistent, which is the only thing that scares me a little bit with him.
Super cheap, though.
Very cheap, 3,700. And then the other one, if we want to talk about not being consistent, but even cheaper, 2,900 is Chigakonkwo, just because Houston has allowed the 3rd most fantasy points per game to tight ends. And I believe it's the 4th most receiving yards, and actually the most targets in the league and 2nd most receptions to tight end. And if you see Chigakonkwo, look at that. We're at 6 or more targets for the last 5. I know the yards kind of been hit or miss, but this is the week that he scored. He hasn't even scored a touchdown all year. No. This is the week Okonkwo scores his first touchdown of the season.
And not so fast, my friend, on the consistency, because I talked about Chigi Okonkwo a couple weeks ago, and lo and behold, he has 3 straight clutch games. Now, caveat to that is with I mentioned how bad the tight end position is. You can go like 4 for 40 and get a clutch game at the tight end
It's
spot
true.
most weeks. So he is getting you a clutch game, and he is, getting, like you said, he's getting a few targets as the season's kind of going on. A guy that if you drafted him in yearly, you probably long since jettisoned him, and you probably haven't needed him because some other guys have popped up. But he has. You're not getting Travis Kelce type numbers, but you're not going to get shut out either. But if you got to take a home run swing at a cheap guy, he is getting clutch games. I guess we could say that 4 for 40 is getting him in there.
Yeah, I mean 2,900, super cheap. So
yeah,
and then over at defense, San Fran's the highest price, but Kyler at home has been pretty good. So I'm not really quite looking there. I like the Chiefs against New England. I like the Saints. Against the Giants. It's not a love. Falcons at 36 against Carolina. It's really hard to not go at Carolina right now. If you're not a believer in Case Keenum, you might look to the Titans at 3,700 with how bad Houston looked last week. Any defenses here that kind of catch your eye?
Went all the way down to $2,500. Jets against the Dolphins. Now that's the caveat with that is too as well. If Tyreek Hill ends up playing or being limited, I like that a lot more. That Jets defense is still really good. They've been solid against the pass. Like you said, you can run on them a little bit. But I thought for $2,500, them averaging 9 points per week. We've seen the Dolphins. Tua's coming off a game where he kind of laid a little bit of an egg. I would say as consistency goes as far as the total offense. Yeah, they beat teams that they're supposed to. They struggle against a little bit better teams. So I went with the cheap route. It could end up going great. It could end up going like the Chargers defense on Thursday night in one league where I'm out of it. Didn't really worry about setting a lineup, and I just happened to look at the team and they scored me -3. That could happen as well, but it's hard to argue with this Jets defense and how well that they've been playing.
So for Tua's career in the games that he started, he's 3-0 against the Jets.
Okay.
However, 273 passing yards, 196 passing yards, 243 passing yards. He's got 5 touchdowns and 5 interceptions in those 3 games. He's been sacked 3 times, lost 1 fumble. And when you look, the Jets just put up 13 fantasy points against Miami last time. Tyreek Hill's a little banged up. Maybe Zach Wilson can help sustain drives for a little bit, but this Jets defense has been tough on quarterbacks, and I think it's a good play because I think everyone's going to see Miami and be like, well, we can't do them. So we may actually get a lower-owned Jets team. Maybe that's what we need.
And it's so far down on the price point. I scrolled and I thought maybe I missed something that they had a Saturday game or they played Monday night, but you have to go almost all the way down to the list. I mean, they're there around the Commanders defense. They're actually cheaper than the Commanders defense this week, which I think is just insane.
Yep. All right. I kind of like the Jets, so let's just put them in now, just because that's what we're going to do. Oh, why'd I click Jameis Winston? Well, I guess that's our quarterback.
All right, done. That's your guy you have to have in. So let's do it.
Yeah, right. Okay, so now we each get our one guy that we have to have in the lineup. I'll let you go first. Who's our one guy?
David Njoku.
Okay.
Not even close.
Okay. Well, I could use this to get a high-priced guy that I want to afford in the lineup, but I don't think I'm going to. I'm going Jaden Reed. I don't know how we turn him down at 4,900. The fact that he's not the highest priced receiver on his team is absolutely criminal. So that's just kind of where I'm at. So let's go to quarterback. We actually have a little bit more. I mean, look at this. We're all value this week. So this is going to get really interesting now. I am fine with Jordan Love or Matthew Stafford. If I had a lean, I would probably go Stafford. But what say you?
I trust him a little more, and if all things are equal and you like both, go with the cheaper guy, and he's $200 less. So Matthew Stafford it is.
Yep, I am good with that. While we're going to look at this, I'm trying to pull up because I know that game's at home for him. I'm trying to see if he's got any gnarly home road splits. I would assume, like most guys, probably better at home. Stafford, 9-4 touchdown to interception ratio at home. A little less yards per game, but he's fine. He's been in the league long enough. We don't got to worry about him too much. All right, running back position. What do we think here?
Really like me some Rashad White.
Okay.
Really like that one. I know you don't like Zeke, so I'll let you roll with the second one.
I'm going to put Bijan.
Okay, like it.
All right, let's go to receiver. So I guess now we got to make the pick. Kupp or Nakua?
I'm going Nakua just because here again he's cheaper.
Yep. Cool. And then wide receiver and a flex. So actually, if you want Zeke, we could probably throw Zeke in the flex. Gives us 500 for our last receiver. Curtis Samuel brings it back on the other side of that Ram stack. So that would make sense to do. If we keep going down a little bit, there's Shakir. That's only 3,800 though. Sheesh. I mean, it looks like Curtis Samuel is going to be the move. Curtis Samuel's my favorite one of the guys there.
Yeah, with the only, like I said, the other guy I was looking at that $5,000 price point was Noah Brown, but it's not guaranteed he's going to play. And like I said, you got Case Keenum in there. You don't know the rapport he's built with any of these guys, so that's a little sketchy.
So if we go Curtis Samuel, that gives us Stafford and Nakua from the Rams. We got Curtis Samuel on the other side, so we're going to hope that game pops off. We got Rashad White for Tampa Bay, Jaden Reed from Green Bay, so that gives us both sides of that game. Bijan in a good matchup against Carolina, and Njoku in a good matchup. Volume Zeke, probably the chalk play for cash games because of the workload, because what did he end up getting last week? He had 22 carries and 8 targets, and they have no better option anyway. Hopefully that game stays close enough, but if not, he should get enough passing game work, and then that gives us the Jets defense against Miami, who's a pretty talented team. We got $400. I don't really think there's anything we're going to be able to do. We couldn't even go from Nakua to Kupp if we were like desperate for cut. We could go Nakua to Debo, but that moves it away and it doesn't make it worth it.
I mean, the only other guy I looked at the flex spot, I know you're not crazy about Zeke. I looked at Jerome Ford too at $5,500, and if we went ahead and did that, that'd give you another $300 savings that we could maybe upgrade something. But I don't know that I really see a lot of glaring upgrades that we need to make across the board. But like I said, if you want to play with that, we could. But I kind of like what we have.
No, I think we're good there, because when we look at each position, basically we have Puka Nacua, who's 69% consistent on the season, and he's been a wide receiver one all year. Rashad White's at 77% and Bijan's at 85%. So we got 2 consistent options there at the running back position. I'm not counting Zeke just because his beginning of the year is kind of it's throwing off his numbers. Stafford's 50%, but he's been much, much better of late. So he's been a more clutch option. Then we go over to tight end. We got David Njoku, who's up to 62% on the year. Mix in Jaden Reed, Curtis Samuel, guys like that. Take a little chance on some upside there. I like it for the Week 15 consistently Cashin lineup. So that'll do it. Matthew Stafford, Rashad White, Bijan Robinson, Jaden Reed, Puka Nacua, Curtis Samuel, David Njoku, Ezekiel Elliott, and the Jets defense. Ron, let everyone know where they can find you and what you got here at BigGuyFantasySports.com.
At Ron Rigney on the X. Check out the Thursday Night Consistency Show from myself and Mr. Bob Lung. Check out all the great articles coming out daily over at BigGuyFantasySports.com. And then you guys are going to get right back on the winning track with the Prop It Like It's Hot coming up very, very shortly. How'd you guys do last week, by the way?
I have not heard from Bob, so I do not know exactly. I didn't calculate his. I think I went 2-1.
Okay.
I
can't remember what you guys went last week. I think you guys definitely went over 500, and you guys are still killing it for the total year. So
yeah, it was 4-2. I think it was 4-2 the week before. Let me just see quick. I know I got Jordan Love wrong. I went for a plus money bet and didn't get it. DJ Moore over 5.5 receptions and Debo over. So I went 2-1. I don't know what Bob went, to be honest. So that was that. But I'm over on X at Colby R. Conway, and you can find a lot of my work here at BigGuyFantasySports.com, including the Prop It Like It's Hot podcast. So if you want some player prop action for Week 15, make sure you check that out. But give me a follow on X. Make sure you give Ron a follow at X, and we'll see you for next week for the Week 16 edition of the Consistently Cashin podcast.